Hello and welcome to Didz Plays Total War. Today I'm going to be looking at the Kingdom of Prussia in the Grand Campaign. Prussia is generally recognised to be one of the harder factions to play successfully in Empire Total War, and I've noticed a lot of posts on the TW Centre forums from new players who are struggling to actually survive the early stages of their Prussian campaign. So what I thought I'd do is just play through the opening few turns of a Prussian campaign and just show you how I would cope with the Prussian faction and what the challenges are, and a few tips as to sort of how to cope with them. I'm not suggesting that this is the best way to play Prussia, or the quickest way to play Prussia, or even the most exciting way to play Prussia. It's the way I play Prussia, and hopefully you'll gain a few tips from watching, assuming of course that I'm successful. If you've been playing Empire Total War for months or years, then you're probably not going to gain much from watching this video. This is primarily aimed at brand new players, and for that reason I've stripped all my mods out of the game, so what you'll see is about as near to the vanilla game as I can get my game. It certainly looks to me like the vanilla game, and it seems to play like the vanilla game. There may be one or two changes in there that I've actually hard-coded into the data files, but essentially it should play exactly like a brand new Empire Total War game. For the purposes of this video, I've opted for the short campaign, which requires you to capture 15 regions by 1750, but it actually names 14 of the regions that you have to capture, so you don't have a lot of choice, which actually makes it hard. If you look at the long campaign, you have another 49 years to complete it. You have to capture another 11 regions, but you still only have the same 14 regions that are mandatory. So although you have to capture another 11 regions, you've got 49 more years to do it in, and you've got complete freedom as to which regions you capture, which actually makes the long campaign easier than the short campaign. The easiest, by the same token, the easiest campaign is actually world domination, because although you have 40 regions and you only have as much time as the long campaign gives you, you've got total freedom as to which regions you go for. So you can avoid going to war with people you don't want to go to war with, and you can pick on the weak nations and rebel states and etc. With impunity. So you've got much more flexibility. And I often play world domination just when I want to do sort of a what-if campaign, to see what would happen if say Prussia didn't actually follow the same strategy as they did historically. The most disappointing victory condition is actually prestige victory, which would have been really challenging and interesting if the sole purpose of a prestige victory was to become the most prestigious nation in the world. Unfortunately, for some reason, CA have put in these mandatory territorial gains into the prestige victory, which actually makes it little better than say a long campaign setting. So rather defeats the object. It would have been nice to have had a mode where you didn't have to concentrate on territorial gains at all, but just had to gain prestige by enlightenment or whatever. That would have been an interesting twist, but CA didn't see it that way. So I'm going to choose a short campaign. I'm not planning to play this campaign right through to the end anyway, so it doesn't really make a lot of difference, but that's the setting I've chosen. Right, I'll also mention, say a few words about the difficulty level. Many players just have a macho moment when they see the difficulty level and feel you're bound to sort of rack it up to very hard, and they can feel good about themselves when they win. In the vast majority of computer games, that's a valid argument, because the games get harder as you rack up the difficulty level, which sort of makes logical sense. Certainly if you're playing computer chess, then racking up the difficulty level gives the computer more time to think about its moves, therefore its moves are more intelligent and it's harder to beat. Unfortunately, that logic doesn't work with Empire Total War. The campaign difficulty, as you rack up the campaign difficulty, all it does is impose penalties, and most importantly, it imposes penalties on your diplomatic status. So basically, if you rack up the campaign difficulty to very hard, it doesn't actually make the game harder to play, it just makes everybody hate you. You have such a high diplomatic penalty that you can't get anyone to be reasonable. A country that only had 2 men and a dog in its army would attack you anyway. So it just becomes a psychotic mess. And that's fine if what you want to play is a campaign where you're at war with the entire world and you're fighting adversity from the outset. But if you actually want to enjoy the full features of Empire Total War, which includes the diplomacy and the trade and the economic development, then you have to turn the campaign difficulty down. And I've found through trial and error that you can't really go much higher than normal without the whole thing just sort of becoming a mess. So for the full experience of the campaign, I wouldn't recommend having the difficulty any higher than normal. If you really do want to have the entire world on your back from the opening of the game, then by all means put it up to very hard, and you have non-stop battles right from the start and swamped with enemies, which is fine, but I find that gets rather boring. I prefer to be able to experience all the features of the game and use all the strategy that's built into the game design. Battle difficulty, likewise, if you put battle difficulty up to very hard, there's a lot of debate about what actually happens, but the general consensus is that what it does is give the AI troops more morale and more attack bonuses. So they don't run away as rapidly as they ought to, and they fight more effectively as individual soldiers. Unfortunately, what it doesn't do is make the AI any more intelligent on the battlefield. So it still does the same dumb things, but it just takes longer to beat them. So I sort of compromise. I put it up to hard, which makes the AI armies slightly harder to beat, or harder is the wrong word. It doesn't make them harder to beat because they're still stupid. So you'll still beat them easily if you use the right tactics. What it means is that the soldiers are dumber and they don't run away even when you've outflanked them and you're killing them all over the place. So it actually destroys the AI's armies more completely because they stand around and die for longer. And again, it's a matter of choice. If you feel you want to have more blood on the battlefield, then turn the battle difficulty up because you'll get to kill more. It's really up to you. Right, so let's start the campaign. I'm going to let Miss Whiplash do her briefing, just for the benefit of anyone who's watching this video and hasn't actually got the game or hasn't tried playing the Prussian campaign before. So I'll just let her do her spiel. It's reasonably good advice, but we'll talk about it in more detail later.
Your first priority should be to research a superior military drill doctrine at the college in Magdeburg. Once in place, increase the size of your army and look to expand your territory to encompass the region of Silesia to the south. You could then try to link Brandenburg with historic East Prussia, currently separated by Polish-controlled West Prussia. If possible, maintain good diplomatic and trade relationships with fellow Protestant nations such as Britain, Sweden, Denmark, and the United Provinces, whilst watching for the advance of Catholic France and Austria. They may try to claim your lands and those of your allies in the name of their corrupt church, and your capital will likely be their first target.
Right, so that's the briefing. It's a reasonable summary of the goals of the Prussian player, and it's also a reasonable warning of the likely threats that you're going to face, certainly in the early part of the game. What it doesn't do is explain how to do it, and before we plunge into the actual gameplay, I think it's worth actually spending some time looking at the situation that Prussia is in at the start of the campaign, and just considering how we're going to achieve these goals that Miss Whiplash has just set us. So let's have a look at Prussia in a bit more detail. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go into any more detail in this video because I'm running out of time. So click on the link, and the next video will look at the Prussian geopolitical situation, and we'll start to talk about the strategy that I'm going to follow for the campaign in general. So speak to you again in a minute.